Hello, everybody. Welcome to East-West Collision. And in Mandarin, that's 东西方碰撞. 碰撞, collision. Now, for me, this is how I like to think of it, where I'm asking myself, where do East and West ways of seeing the world, where do they hit each other? 碰撞. In other words, where are they different, right? And also, where are they the same? And I'm interested in this because being a Western person, educated in the West, I'm Canadian, and I studied some literature and some history and some culture from the West, from Europe and the classical world, Latin and Greek, and ancient Rome and Greece. And so I have a general knowledge of the way that we have thought about some of these questions in the Western tradition. And in some ways, it seems incomplete to me. And so I've always been very curious about Chinese culture, especially, but also Indian and other Asian cultures and native cultures, and how human beings see the world and what can I learn from that. And I don't know too much, honestly, and what I am going to say here is really my own very limited opinion. And I don't know too much, honestly, but it seems important to me kind of to ask the questions, maybe more so than to give the answers. I'm a big believer in curiosity. So, 东西方碰撞, and talking about where the East and West collide in this area of creation stories. Creation stories. I believe the Chinese word for that is 创造故事. 创造故事. And these are stories that exist in every culture about how the earth came to be. And there are dozens and dozens of different stories that people have come up with. And for myself, I have always found the Big Bang story not really convincing me. I haven't found that Big Bang. I'm going to call it a story. I don't think that story, I find it not satisfying. And like a lot of things in Western science, and especially in Western science, I find they make sense as far as they go, but they don't really explain everything. So let's look at the Pangu story. Pangu. Now, I think almost every Chinese person has heard this story. This is considered a folk tale in China. It's a story that people very often will hear from their parents or their grandparents when they're little children. And it's, I think, as far as I have heard from my Chinese friends, it's kind of more thought of something that's not really very serious, just a folk tale, which is fine. But for me, it is actually really interesting. Because as I say, when I think of the Big Bang, no, I think there must be more to it than that. Because if you look at Big Bang, the idea is that, okay, first of all, there was nothing. And then somehow this nothing exploded into something. Now, if you are a scientist or a physicist, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think basically That's the idea, that there was nothing and then it exploded into something. Now, for me, that's a problem because it's illogical. Now, what I like with the Pangu story is that, to me, it is more reasonable, 比较有道理, because it's not really saying that there was nothing. The Pangu story is saying that it started with a chaos. Where did that initial state come from is the question. So that's why, for me, Big Bang is not a good enough story to convince me that that's the complete picture. So when you look at Pangu, and again, I'll just go to Wikipedia. I'm sorry. Wikipedia. Wikipedia is good for some things, though. So in Wikipedia, they tell this story, and it has the two parts that you are familiar with. And I will tell the story again. Now, in the first part of the story, there is a cosmic egg. In the beginning, there was nothing, and the universe was in a featureless, formless, primordial state. So, formless means it had no shape and no form, which means that really we can't imagine it, actually. And I like that better than what Wikipedia says, because I can imagine heat and density, but heat, you need to have something. And so we're talking about what was there before there was something. But in the Pangu story, it's not a thing. It's featureless and formless. It's just a thing. It's not a thing. It's more mysterious. And then it says that this chaos state, actually in another version of the story, which I am looking at in this book here, they use the word chaos. 混沌, 一团混沌, 混沌. And if I'm not mistaken, that in Cantonese, that is wonton, like wonton soup. So wonton soup is like chaos soup. So that's awesome. I think that's awesome to eat some chaos soup. And I like wonton soup, hundun. So it was a hundun. It was this place that was dark, and there was this giant inside this dark, formless egg. And this giant was sleeping inside the formless egg. Now, actually, the idea of an egg, cosmic egg, that is an idea that comes into many different cultures. It says, for example, Proto-Indo-European. Proto-Indo-European, that was the cultures that were proto is like the first ones, the first Indian and European cultures. Because Indian culture and like European culture have similar source. Like Indian languages are related to European languages. So their creation stories are similar. So there was this idea of the cosmic egg. And an egg, it's interesting, right? An egg, like when you look at an egg, you don't see the chicken. You can't imagine the chicken by looking at the egg, right? So in the Pangu story, there was this cosmic egg, and in this version of the story, that was coming together for 18,000 years. And after 18,000 years, and I don't know why that's important, 18,000 years, But for some reason, at that point, yin and yang, yin yang, became balanced, and Pangu, the giant, woke up. So yin yang became balanced. Now, for us in the West, many people are interested in the Taiji. This in Chinese is called the Taiji, the great ultimate, right? If I'm not mistaken, the great ultimate is the Taiji. In English, we call that the yin yang. And to me, this is a superior concept to what I see in the Big Bang, because it seems to me that first the opposites, were the first things to, emerge out of the formless. That first there were the opposites, 对立, 遭遇对立, right? We are encountering opposites in our life, and so I really think the yin-yang, the yin-yang way of looking at the world is very useful. And that's why I, and also many Westerners really, are actually interested in Taoism, Daojia, not so much Daojiao, which is the Taoist religion, but many Westerners are interested in Daojia, Taoist philosophy, Lao Tzu. Many people in the West are familiar a little bit, at least a little bit, with Lao Tzu. Okay, so for me, that is interesting in Pangu. So that's the first part of Pangu, that I think the idea of opposites coming together, 那个对立, 在一起, and that becomes the world. We also see that in Lao Tzu, the same idea. So I like that idea. And it's, I like the stories too, right? There's the Taiji, cosmological state of the universe. Okay, so that first part of the story is this cosmic egg. And yeah, we see that in other cultures also. Although it's not always a cosmic egg. Sometimes, well, there's a number of, if you look at the number of creation stories, there are many, many different creation stories. Creation from chaos, and there's Pangu. And then emergence, creation from nothing. And then other ideas like that there was a bird that created the universe, or that somehow some parents came, and all kinds of, I shouldn't say all kinds of stories, because they are in groups. Now, as you know, the Western tradition is the story that we believe now, most people, is the Big Bang story. But of course, traditionally was the story of the book of Genesis from the Bible and the Garden of Eden. Although, actually, the Garden of Eden isn't the first part. That's not when the earth was created. In the Bible, the idea, let's say the story, is that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. And so the idea that there was, the first thing was this energy, the word, which in a word is a kind of energy, right? Energy that comes from the mouth. And that there's, the opposites are the speaker and the spoken, that the one speaking and the word, and that you have these two things coming out. That idea of the universe coming from the spoken word of God is in other religions too. In ancient Egyptian religion, the god was Ta, and the story was that the god Ta spoke, and that created the universe, which to me actually kind of makes sense, because the God is something that you can't really imagine, in the sense that it's beyond the opposites, and then the opposites, 对立, the opposites come into existence, come into being. Things start happening. So I like that. I like that idea. Now, the second part of the Pangu story, actually, this video is probably long enough. I think I'm going to stop here. I want to talk about the second part of the Pangu story and compare that also to the Western version, because that's interesting. But I think this video is long enough. So part one of the Pangu story, how the universe emerges from the cosmic egg. And there's I didn't mention that when the giant Pangu wakes up inside this egg, then he starts to use an axe, and he starts to hack with his giant axe. He separates yin and yang. He's hacking, he's cutting. How does that go? 左砍右劈. 左砍右劈. He's slashing to the left and the right with his axe. And that creates the earth and the sky. Okay, so he's hacking at the hundun. He's hacking, he's cutting with his axe. And that motion of this giant doing this creates the yin and yang. In other words, the 对立, the opposites, come more into form. And those opposites coming into form create the world. For me, that's actually quite what we say, grounded. To me, it 很有道理. So, okay, I'm going to stop there, and I will continue in the next one, talking part 2 of Pangu creation story. Okay, thanks for listening.